Well, I became a dairy farmer a couple decades ago when I married one. And I'm a quick study, so I learned to milk cows, learned to feed calves, and I got very good with a round baler, mostly because my husband has a bad knee. And in those days, you had to hold the clutch in the entire time the baler was wrapping. So I said, I have a good knee. And so my son was pretty young. We could take him in the cab of the tractor, and from then on, I find my summers in front of a round baler. But I wanted to tell you about one particular day. So this is when my son was probably about 4 or 5 years old, and it had been a really wet spring. And on our farm with heavy clay soils in South Hammond, you couldn't get onto the land to do anything until at least the first part of, well into June anyways, first part of June. So we head out this one morning because we'd finally actually been able to cut some hay. And it was ready to be baled. And miraculously, it is true that if you can possibly spin your way through a field that seems to be laying in water, miraculously letting the sun hit the ground, it'll dry. And the hay was ready to go. So that morning, we get some snacks. We got a bottle of water. My son's in the back of the tractor. He had this little bench. We put just a 1x10 piece of wood that was a little bench, a couple of little pillows. We're good to go. Now, the day before when I'd been baling a different field, I told my husband that night the baler was acting funny. And the only words I could use was it was driving hard. Like it just felt like it was really working hard, and it had taken off a shear pin, which it never does, even though I hadn't plugged it or anything, and I wasn't sure why. So that morning, Brian had already been through it, and he'd gone over it, and anything that took grease got grease. Anything else that needed oil got oiled. And he says, I don't know, looks good to me. Okay, so we went. He went off to cut hay in another field. Nathan and I went to the field and started baling. Well, we did the outside rounds pretty much without incident. And by the time we'd done those, Nathan was awake for the first bit, but he really, the lull of the engine, he was asleep after a while. So that was pretty good. We started doing the up and down rows. And I don't remember anything really unusual happening until that very faint smell of smoke. Now, I'm in the cab of a tractor, so I know if I'm getting a faint whiff, it's a little bit bigger than that. And when you bale, you're always looking over here because that's where the pickup is. The fire was over there. So by the time I actually looked around, I saw this very faint wisps of smoke. I stopped, shut everything down, climbed up the front of the baler. I think what I thought I could do is I was going to reach over the top of the baler and just grab the offending little bit of smoky bits that was obviously too much friction, dry hay and friction, what could go wrong? And I couldn't reach it. So I scrambled back down again, zip into the cab, grab my little water bottle. It's a reused Pepsi plastic bottle, right? And so I scrambled back up again, and I can't quite reach it. So there I am. I'm throwing the water from the Pepsi bottle at where the smoke is coming from. And that's not having any effect either, and now there's little tiny flames that are visible. So I'm just sort of starting to panic. So I get back down because when we cut this field, there was water everywhere. And I'm looking around where I can refill my Pepsi bottle. And there's nothing. There's no water anywhere. And by now, the flames are really coming out. And I think I said it actually out loud to no one in particular. You may burn up this round baler, but you're not taking the tractor too. So I decided I'm beginning to panic a little bit more now. I've got to unhook everything. So I stop, and for whatever reason, I kind of went into that unhooking mode where I stop and grab the jack and start undoing, putting the jack down, pull the pin, try to get the PTO shaft undone. It always stuck. It was always hard for me to get that on or off. If it's got the knuckle thing and the pin you push in, and you just got to hold your mouth just right. Oh, my husband always told me that And it's funny how you remember these things. He says, if you ever get stuck, you can just drive apart. Those PTO shafts comes right apart because there's two pieces. That's what I ended up doing. And in the end, that was the only part of the round baler that was saved. So after unhooking, I put the tractor in road gear and I'm driving diagonally across the field, at which point the sleeping one behind the seat wakes up. Mom, what the heck? He's holding on to the seat. I said, shut up, the round baler's on fire. Oh. Because he's a farm boy. He knows he knows these things are important. Because I figured I'd head to the house. The closest fire extinguisher was there. Grab the fire extinguisher, go back, right? Zip into the driveway of the house, run into the kitchen. From the window that looks out over the field, that was really just next door to the house, the flames have now turned black because the tires have become engulfed. So I realized I don't need to bring the fire extinguisher. I just need to call the fire department. So I call those guys and go out into the driveway where the carpenters who were on the roof begin coming down the ladder. And up the road, I see the hired man that works at the neighbor's farm pulling into the driveway where they have big, giant smiles on their faces. And they say, we saw your smoke signals. And so I'm standing around waiting for the fire department to arrive, feeling really helpless. And I said to the roof guy, I don't know how I am going to explain to my husband that I just burnt up the round baler. And he looks down over my shoulder and he says, I don't think you're going to have to tell him. I'm pretty sure he's figured it out for himself. And I turn around and there he is coming up. He had it wound right out as fast as that tractor or the hay-vine behind it would go up the road from the field where he was. Because, of course, once the black smoke came, everybody in the neighborhood knew. And the fire department arrived. And most of those guys, they were my neighbors. They decided that the field was still too soft for them to take the fire engine into the field to put the fire out. And we said, yeah, fine, well, then go away then. No, we can't do that because once you call us to a fire, we have to put it out. There's rules for this sort of thing. So that meant that my husband had to unhook, grab a chain, and he and this other guy wrapped a chain around the tongue, so they had to bring the burning baler to the fire engine parked next to the road. And he's cursing me the whole time. Why did you put the stupid jack down? Because they had to hop it across the field. Because, I don't know. You do these things when you're nervous. So they get the fire out. We called the insurance guy. We left it right next to the road for casual viewing over the weekend. Because it's the country and that's what you do. But I learned 3 really important things that day. And the first is, I never go to the field without a fire extinguisher in the tractor. The second is, we'd never have a piece of machinery on the place ever again that has those sealed bearings that you never have to grease, right? And the third thing I learned was that fame and notoriety kind of work in very strange ways in the country. A couple weeks later, I'm at Nathan's school, picking him up from school, and 3 little 5th graders come up, and they got big smiles on their faces, and they look at me as I'm just standing there waiting for him. I said, "You're the lady that burnt the baler." Like I was a rock star or something. But yep, that was me.